Balerion the Dread. The beast that Aegon rode across the sea. His flames forged the Iron Throne and brought the Seven Kingdoms to heel. Powerful.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're looking at the largest and most formidable dragon ridden by the Targaryens during their reign in Westeros, Balerion the Black Dread. Balerion was the last of the dragons born in Valyria. The other two that took part in Aegon's conquest, Vhagar and Meraxes, were both born on Dragonstone. The exact year of Balerion's birth is not known. It was no later than 114 BC, but it could have been up to 7 years prior to that year. Balerion was named after the god of death and the underworld, one of the many ancient gods that were worshipped in Old Valyria. Balerion was ominous enough in his own right that he definitely didn't need to be named after the god of death. He was entirely black, both his wings and scales, even his flames were black, although on occasion there was some red mixed into his fire. At his peak, Balerion's flames could melt both steel and stone. His mouth was large enough that he could swallow a cow whole. His teeth were as long as swords, and it was said that he was so enormous that he could sometimes cast a shadow across an entire town as he flew over it. Now, Aegon the Conqueror is said to be Balerion's first rider, but this seems unlikely. Aegon was born in 27 BC, which is around 87 years after Balerion was born. 12 years before the doom of Valyria, Aenar Targaryen, who was Aegon the Conqueror's great-great-great-grandfather, brought 5 dragons with him to Dragonstone. One of those, of course, was Balerion. So it seems unusual that through all the intervening years and family members that were born and lived on Dragonstone, that Balerion was not claimed for decades until Aegon came along. Some might say he was extremely selective, but he did end up having 3 additional riders in the 57 years after Aegon's death. But there's nothing else written on this, so Aegon is the first known rider of the Black Dread. The first mention of Balerion being involved in major battles came when Aegon involved himself in the wars in the Disputed Lands. The Disputed Lands is an area in southwestern Essos. The free cities of Lys, Myr, and Tyrosh often became involved in small wars for control of the region. Pentos and Tyrosh asked Aegon to join their alliance to stop an incursion by Volantis. Aegon accepted, flew to Lys, and with Balerion burned the Volantene fleet. During the conquest of Westeros, there was a battle that came to be known as Aegon's First Test. He arrived at Blackwater Rush, which is a river in the southern Riverlands, just west of what would, in 2 BC, become King's Landing. It was here that he fought the houses of Darkland and Mooten, and while Aegon had Orlys Baratheon lead the Targaryen army to meet them, it was Balerion who was the difference in the battle, inflicting heavy casualties, while Aegon's losses were light. The lords of both houses were killed in action. This rout led to over a dozen nearby castles submitting and Aegon being declared the king at the Aegon fort. But the fighting in Westeros had just begun, and the battle that Balerion was most known for, if you could even call this massacre one, was at Harrenhal. As the other houses in the Riverlands declared for House Targaryen, King Harren the Black took to his castle at Harrenhal, which he believed to be impregnable, and settled in for a long siege. Aegon parleyed with Harren at the gates, and this is what happened from Fire and Blood. "Yield now," Aegon began, "and you may remain as Lord of the Iron Islands. Yield now, and your sons will live to rule after you. I have 8,000 men outside your walls." "What is outside my walls is of no concern to me," said Harren. "Those walls are strong and thick, but not so high as to keep out dragons. Dragons fly." "I built in stone," said Harren. "Stone does not burn." To which Aegon said, "When the sun sets, your line shall end." As the last of the light of the sun faded, Black Harren's men stared into the gathering darkness, clutching their spears and crossbows. When no dragon appeared, some may have thought that Aegon's threats had been hollow. But Aegon Targaryen took Balerion up high, through the clouds, up and up, until the dragon was no bigger than a fly upon the moon. Only then did he descend, well inside the castle walls. On wings as black as pitch, Balerion plunged through the night, and when the great towers of Harrenhal appeared beneath him, the dragon roared his fury and bathed them in black fire, shot through with swirls of red. Stone does not burn, Harren had boasted, but his castle was not made of stone alone. Wood and wool, hemp and straw, bread and salted beef and grain all took fire. Nor were Harren's ironmen made of stone, smoking from the walkways to die above the ground below, and even stone will crack and melt if a fire is hot enough. The river lords outside the castle walls said later that the towers of Harrenhal glowed red against the night, like 5 great candles. And like candles, they began to twist and melt runnels of molten stone which ran down their sides. Harren and his last sons died in the fires that engulfed his monstrous fortress that night. No other conflict presented in fire and blood better demonstrates the sheer power and destructive capability of Balerion more than the attack on Harrenhal, which he solely won. The last significant battle in Aegon's conquest was the Field of Fire. This is something that you can see they drew inspiration from in Season 7 of Game of Thrones, when Dany on Drogon attacked the Lannister armies. For Aegon, it was the Gardeners and the Lannisters that he faced. His army was outnumbered 5-1, but with Balerion and his wives Visenya and Rhaenys on their dragons, the battle turned into a rout, one that even ended House Gardener. Balerion also had a role in the forging of the Iron Throne. It was his fire that melted the swords of Aegon's fallen enemies. In 2 AC, Aegon flew him to the Iron Isles to settle the succession problem there. King Harren, who died during the assault at Harrenhal, had ruled over the Iron Isles, which fell into turmoil following his death. A couple of years later, Aegon began the First Dornish War that would last nearly a decade. After Rhaenys and Meraxes were killed over Dorne, Aegon on Balerion and Visenya on Vhagar burned every one of the castles aside from Sunspear multiple times. After Aegon's death, Balerion was claimed by his youngest son Maegor, who would become known as Maegor the Cruel. What's interesting is that Maegor was already 25 and he had not yet had a dragon. He claimed that only the Black Dread was worthy of him. Maegor flew Balerion to put down the rebellion in the Vale, and also during the Faith Militant Uprising, where he burned the Sept of Remembrance. Septs and religious uprisings haven't had the best of luck in Westeros. In the battle beneath the God's Eye, Maegor on Balerion easily killed his nephew, Aegon the Uncrowned, and his dragon Quicksilver, who was only 1/4 the size of the Black Dread. Aegon had insisted that he was the rightful heir to the throne. Maegor, though, died young at 36, and afterwards Balerion returned to live on Dragonstone. 6 years later, in 54 AC, began a very interesting period for the Black Dread. He was claimed by Arya Targaryen, who was the daughter of Aegon the Uncrowned, who Balerion had killed. Shortly after both Arya and Balerion disappeared, her mother Rhaena searched the 7 kingdoms for her. King Jaehaerys even had his Master of Coin's agents across the Narrow Sea look for Arya. Over 1 year later, she finally returned to King's Landing on Balerion. Arya was close to death and with a high fever. The maesters said that it seemed as if she was cooking from within, and that there were swellings beneath her skin that moved. When she was placed in ice just before her death, slimy, unspeakable things emerged from her. The creatures, though, died in the ice water. It's believed that Balerion decided to take Arya back to Valyria, where he had been born, and the creatures there were the result of the doom. There were some scars and wounds on Balerion as well, but he was not seriously injured or afflicted. For the next 37 years, the Black Dread lived in the Dragon Pit until in 93 AC he was claimed by Viserys. What's funny is that Viserys rode on Balerion only once, and it was around King's Landing 3 times. He told his father that he had planned on going to Dragonstone, but didn't think Balerion was strong enough to make it there. Less than 1 year later, the most powerful dragon to ever fly over Westeros, Balerion the Black Dread, died of old age and was at least 208 years old. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button. And if you're interested in more on A Song of Ice and Fire and House of the Dragon, listen to Caraxes and subscribe. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I'll see you soon.